While Texas may lead the nation in alcohol-related fatalities, we are by no means the only state that's dealing with this chronic problem of impaired driving. Kendell Poole is the chairman of the Governor's Highway Safety Association, a position that gives him the opportunity to see up close what is happening throughout the country and how other states are tackling the problem of drinking and driving. Kendell comes to GHSA from his work as the director of the Governor's Highway Safety Office in Tennessee. So he knows what it's like to develop and oversee programs that deal with impaired driving. So I'd like to welcome Kendell Poole to give us a national perspective on impaired driving and how the other states are curtailing.
Thanks. All right, everybody stand up. Y'all been sitting for about an hour. Stand up, stretch. Please. That looks good. All right, you can sit down. It's great to be in Texas, birthplace of my mother. Anybody here from Port Arthur? All right, got Port Arthur back there, home of Janis Joplin, Jimmy Johnson, all kinds of good people. Nacogdoches, anybody here from Nacogdoches? All right. Lots of relatives there, Nacogdoches. And Crockett, pretty small place. Got lots of people in Crockett. The beauty of me coming to Texas this morning is y'all can understand me. A lot of times when I go across the country, I was actually in Boston this summer, and I swear I think we needed an interpreter. I mean, that cab driver could not understand me, and I could not understand him. But I got to where I was going, and it was a miracle. But I do have the opportunity to go across the United States and talk about what we're doing in highway safety. And let me just reiterate what's been said already here this morning. You are blessed to have the leadership that you have. As I sit and I listen to John Barton and Carol and spending time with Terry, and I've known Georgia for several years now, you're blessed. I mean, Texas is big. Texas has problems that other states don't have. Now, I'm not going to be cocky and don't shoot me, but I've actually got some friends that wanted me to remind you this morning that if there weren't a Tennessee, there wouldn't be a Texas, okay? So, you know, there's a little place called the Alamo right down the street, but I didn't say that. They told me to say that. But you guys, I mean, you talking about 26 million people? I mean, good grief. Do you understand that's over 4 times larger than what I deal with in Tennessee? We've got a little over 6 million people. But there's several things that we do have in common besides the Alamo and besides lots of pickup trucks and the things that go along with that. Lots of high-risk drivers. Lots of high-risk drivers that want to drink and drive. They don't want to wear their seatbelt. They want to speed. And in the Governor's Highway Safety Association, of which Texas is a stalwart member of our organization, we're able to share best practices. And how do we reach those high-risk drivers? And I'm not going to go back over everything that's been said because everybody here has said some great things this morning. And they're very passionate about what they do. But how in the world do we change driver behavior? I mean, it's a lot easier said than done. And we spend a lot of money, and we try to get it in the right places to try to make a difference. And when we start talking about impaired driving, everybody remembers it's about booze, belts, and speed. I mean, those are the 3 things that we've always talked about, booze, belts, and speed. Well, they're not going away anytime soon unless we make the speed limit 10 miles an hour, then we're going to continue to have fatalities on the roadway. The question is, how many are we going to accept? So when we start talking about impaired driving, you saw the stats earlier today. Nearly a third, right at a third nationwide continue to be impaired driving. There are lots of bad things that happen in our nation, and lots of bad things that happen worldwide. And one of the things that's been in the news lately is Ebola, right? Everybody's been talking about Ebola. Please don't get me wrong. It's something that we need to pay great attention to. It's a potential deadly health hazard. But how many people are killed on our roadways right now that is seemingly acceptable compared to something like a health scare with Ebola? Don't get me wrong, potentially damaging, potentially extremely dangerous. But what's impaired driving? I mean, think about that. And how in the world are we as a state, as a country, going to attack this? Well, you've got some great countermeasures in place already. You've got unbelievably good leadership that you've heard from already this morning. And it comes down to two things, and there's two P words that you've already heard this morning, and it's about passion and it's about partnerships. I'm excited to be here today because when I look out in the room, it tells me that we've got partnerships. I mean, I know you didn't just show up because Terry and Carol gave you money and said you got to be here. All right? Some of you, most of you really want to be here. Most of you are actually committed to stopping as best you can the problem of impaired driving on a roadway. What's acceptable? What are we doing to try to head off this epidemic that continues to be an epidemic at the pass? Your passion is to be commended. Your partnerships are to be commended, because if you don't have those, then none of these things, none of these countermeasures are going to work. I think you're blessed already. And I can tell when I go into a state, a lot of times there's political fights within departments, within state and talking to local, or national talking to state. And there's all these unseen things that go along with it that create a negative atmosphere and create a negative attitude that you're not going to be able to positively impact what you're trying to impact. Does that make sense? So I can already tell that you've got the passion to do that. I can already tell that you've got the partnerships and you've got that in place. But it comes back down to, just like we talked about with booze, belts, and speed, it's education, enforcement, and engineering. Your highway safety office, Terry and Carol, are part of your DOT. That's a step in the right direction. Did you know not every state highway safety office is a part of their DOT? There's some that are part of their Department of Safety. There's some that are actually even standalone. And there's a couple, gosh, did you know Alabama's is part of their Department of Economic Community Development? Go figure that one out. I'm not really sure how that works. But education, enforcement, and engineering are the 3 E's. We've added a 4th E in the last few years, emergency response. You do an unbelievable job with education. I've seen your commercials. You've got a great agency that you work with in developing radio, TV. We're moving into the world, and we've moved into the world of digital. How are we going to build digital walls around events? How are we going to reach the hard-to-reach, the high-risk people who seemingly don't give a darn about them or anybody else around them? Great way to impact those. But all the education in the world, all the drive sober or get pulled over, radio spots, TV spots, they're very, very, very important. They're not going to be any good without enforcement. They're not going to be any good without engineering. Mr. Barton's making sure that the roads themselves are physically safe, that we have safety precautions in place like cable rail barrier and rumble strips and rumble stripes and things like that that are proven to work. Making sure the roads themselves are physically safe. Engineering is a huge part of it. But again, it's a three-legged stool: education, enforcement, and engineering. Enforcement, in Georgia, you put something up there that works like crazy. And we've seen it work like crazy. It's the high visibility enforcement. It's the high visibility saturation patrols. It's the high visibility checkpoints. Something that we did in the state of Tennessee that changed the entire way that we look at impaired driving, and we dropped as a result, and it sounds like I'm bragging, but I want to use this as an example from Tennessee. We're pretty blessed with a good deal of alcohol money. And what we decided to do was to give the small, high-visibility enforcement grants $5,000 to any post-certified law enforcement agency in the state. That means they might have 3 officers. That means they might have 4 officers, 5 officers, less than 10. And $5,000 for overtime or for equipment goes a long way in some of those cities. You're probably part of some of those where it does go a long way. But what does it do? It gets them to participate in our campaigns, all of our campaigns, with 100% reporting for regions for any drive sober or get pulled over initiative or mobilization that you're doing. And when you get everybody at the table, it sounds like a group hug thing, but it works. When you get everybody at the table doing high visibility enforcement, your alcohol numbers plummet. Now, we're down in Tennessee at right at about 23% of our overall fatalities being impaired driving fatalities. That doesn't mean we don't have other problems. Our seatbelt usage rate, we're at an all-time high, but we're still below you, Terry. We're at 87.71%. And just like you, over half of our fatalities come from that 12% of our population. Those are our high-risk drivers that we're trying to reach with education and with enforcement. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I can tell you that over half of our fatalities coming from 10 or 12% of our population means that they're probably not just wearing their seatbelt. There's a likely chance that they're speeding. There's a likely chance that they're driving aggressively. There's a likely chance that they might be texting. There's a likely chance that they might be driving impaired. So they might be 4-time losers. Those are the people that we have to try to reach. Those are the people that we have to try to be innovative in reaching with our high visibility enforcement, with our educational program, making sure, obviously, that our roads are engineered safely in particular areas, at intersections, in state highways, where these things, in our rural roads, where they tend to happen more oftentimes than not. Let's talk real quickly, and Georgia mentioned it, about ignition interlock. Ignition interlock is a great tool. It's proven to reduce impaired driving, and we're not where we need to be in the state of Tennessee. There's lots of states out there that aren't where they need to be. But with technology emerging and becoming stronger and stronger and stronger all the time, GHSA, Terry knows this, supports ignition interlocks for first-time DUI offenders. Now, that may not happen right here in the state of Texas yet, but think about what would happen if you utilized technology for first-time DUI offenders, where they had to have a device on their car and a device that worked and a device that was proven to have an effect on impaired driving. What's going on in Washington and Colorado right now? Somebody tell me. Somebody said marijuana. Legalization of marijuana is something that we've got to watch across the country. There is at least 10 states out there right now that are considering approving marijuana either for medical uses or recreational use. Well, regardless of how you feel about smoking pot, if you're smoking pot, you're impaired, right? So it's going to be really interesting to watch our test cases in Washington and Colorado, and we're watching it very, very, very closely to see what happens in those states as a result of recreational marijuana use. Impaired is impaired is impaired. Whether you're driving intoxicated or whether you're smoking pot. All right? Impaired is impaired is impaired. Anything that takes your eyes off the road, anything that keeps your brain from working, those are the things that we've got to really, really, really watch as we move forward. I mean, let's talk about our drug recognition expert programs. Do we have any DREs in the room? Lots of DREs in the room. You need more. You can never have enough. DRE and training, it's the most difficult highway safety class that any of our law enforcement officers can go through. DRE's testimonies are being held up in courts of law all over the place. It helps to be able to have that additional tool to be able to pull someone over for due cause, and you can tell within 45 minutes what they've been taking and how much they've been taking. That has impaired them. Do everything you can to beef up your knowledge and to beef up your resources when it comes to your DRE programs and your drug recognition expert programs. I leaned over to Carol a minute ago and I said, "Are you guys having a problem with pedestrians?" Because that's happening all over the country, particularly when areas become more populated in our urban areas. You've got places like Houston and Dallas and San Antonio, Austin, other places that really are experiencing more of an impaired pedestrian problem. Yeah, I said impaired pedestrian problem. Over half of our pedestrians in the state of Tennessee are impaired. So we've done a good job of taking them out of the cars, and now they're drunk walking. Another problem that we have, it never ends when we create something. Then it's going to be taken to the next level and be taken to the next step. And we've always got to be ready. We've got to be proactive rather than reactive. For years in highway safety, we've been reactive. And we're taking old data and old statistics, and we're doing the best we can with putting our money where it needs to go and where data tells us it should go. But we should be able to be proactive and be able to know exactly where it's going to happen and to get ahead of the curve and to be able to know that we're going to have drunk pedestrians and to be able to know where we're going to have the four-time losers that are more likely to drink, not wear their seatbelt, texting, speeding, driving aggressively, you name it. Where are they going to be? Let's be proactive rather than reactive. Let's use our passion to our advantage. Let's use our passion with our knowledge. Let's use our partnerships to our advantage. That's what's working across the country. I mean, impaired driving fatalities on a national level, if you go back to 2012, Georgia, I think, had it on her slide, on a national level, you know, we're actually up 4% as a country. That's not acceptable. It doesn't mean that we're not doing our jobs in here. It doesn't mean that you don't have people where they should be. It just means that it still is acceptable. What are you doing with your prosecution in Texas? What are we doing across the nation? Are we educating our judges? Are we providing the support to our DA's offices, our district attorneys, and our DUI prosecution? Those are things that are proven to work too with our traffic safety resource prosecutors. It's a multifaceted problem. And it's not one that we can sit in this room today in San Antonio at the Western Riverwalk and say, wow, we've solved it. But we know what's out there. And let's be proactive and utilize those partnerships and our resources. I can guarantee you that I learned more from coming to places like Texas than you probably learned from me. GHSA is about best practices and sharing with other states and what works in other states. Terry's been a vital part of that for years. And Terry can come to a GHSA meeting and hear what's going on in other states, what works, what are the states that share some of the same problems and some of the same demographics, and what's working. You know, we're not proud enough not to be able to steal stuff from other states. And one thing that I've learned is that deaf doesn't know any boundaries, whether there's a state line somewhere or not. Same problems happen everywhere. So why in the world would I not share with Terry, or would Terry not share with somebody else? We've got to be able to continue advancing our knowledge and advancing our passion that goes along with that, and keep these partnerships that you have. It's crucial for you to be able to continue doing this. Congratulations on a great meeting today. It's not very often that you can go into a state and see 325 plus people with people on the waiting list to get in and to hear this. That proves right there that you're ahead of the curve. Not too long ago, I'm not going to name the state, they invited me to come speak to their first ever statewide conference. And I don't think I'm all that, but they didn't even know when I showed up, and they put me in a breakout session room, and 3 people showed up. Now, I don't think I'm all that, but that was a little embarrassing. And it showed me that they didn't have their stuff together. And it showed me that they didn't have their priorities in order. It showed me that they didn't have their partnerships in place. Maybe the passion was misdirected. I don't know what was going on. Those are the places that we need to offer our help and our best practices to, because we're all in this together. So thank you to John and Carol, Terry, George. It's always great to be with you. You're doing great things, and you're headed in the right direction, but we can always, always do more. Thank you.